Welcome to Senator Gonzalez's press conference for the announcement of her fossil fuel divestment bill to advance California climate goals. My name is Leota Valenzuela. I'm the communications coordinator for Senator Gonzalez. You'll be hearing first some remarks from Senator Gonzalez on this very important subject. But before we get started, I did want to take a moment to give some instructions for the press that are attending this event today. As part of our efforts to provide everyone answers to their questions, you may have, we'd appreciate that you insert your questions in the chat box feature on this Zoom. Please provide your name and news organization, and we will do our best to get to all of your questions. If we don't get to your questions for any reason, please do contact me, Leota Valenzuela, at send.ca.gov. I'll also provide that in the chat box for anyone that wants to write down my email and send us any additional questions after the event. And so I will go ahead and open up our press conference, moving along to our session with Senator Lina Gonzalez. Senator.
Thanks, Leo, and hi, everyone. Good morning. I want to start by thanking so many people here today, but we've got an incredible press conference, but we've got our friends from Fossil Free California, Youth versus Apocalypse, and California Faculty Association. We have incredible professors who will speak on this issue. I'll begin with some brief remarks, as mentioned, that will introduce you to Senate Bill 1173, authored by myself and Senator Scott Wiener from San Francisco. And then we'll hear from some advocates from organized labor, environmental advocacy, and from a youth climate activist about the importance of this historic divestment effort. As most Californians are well aware, climate change is having a devastating and irreversible impact on our state and local communities. A warmer planet, year-round mega fires, rising tides, habitat loss, and serious health impacts on vulnerable communities are all the symptoms of human-caused and carbon-driven climate change. In coordination with Governor Newsom, the legislature has made historic budget commitments to try and address this crisis head-on, including over $15 billion, that's with a B, last year on climate, equity, and economic opportunity, and proposals in this year's budget to spend over $6 billion to advance California's climate and transportation goals, $750 million to address immediate drought response, over $1 billion for forest health and fire prevention, and many other mega investments, and the Senate is actually deliberating on many of those now. While California has taken a leading role on the world stage in advancing landmark and far-reaching policy and budget solutions to help fight climate change, we're also unfortunately faced by the contradictory and incongruent fact that our state's two largest employee pension funds use their enormous investment power to finance the very companies that are driving climate change. SB 1173 addresses this dilemma by prohibiting CalPERS and CalSTRS pension funds from investing in fossil fuel companies and requires that they divest from any current investments by 2027, a 5-year strategy horizon. The legislature began this work in 2015 when it required these pension funds to divest from thermal coal companies, and SB 1173 takes the next urgently needed step in ending our state's direct financial support for this carbon-emitting industry. As the senator who represents communities in Southeast Los Angeles, Signal Hill, and my hometown of Long Beach, I see every day the impacts of climate change and the impacts that the fossil fuel industry have on my constituents directly. These are communities of color who are disproportionately burdened by air pollution and toxic emissions. With a combined investment power of over $700 billion, CalSTRS and CalPERS can make powerful and impactful, meaningful decisions in the management of millions of teachers and state employees' pensions, many of whom had voiced their desire and concern for their funds to no longer be used to further exacerbate the issues of climate change. SB 1173 will help realize California's climate vision and also tack on to over 1,500 other organizations that have done so throughout this globe, and ensure that our state's employees' hard-earned pension funds are not utilized to capitalize fossil fuel companies. Divestment needs to be done now, and SB 1173 will make that happen. We'll now hear from some of the activists and incredible community leaders who have been advocating for many years for the divestment from fossil fuels. First off, we'll hear from Miriam Ide, Coordinating Director from Fossil Free California. Welcome, Miriam.
Thank you, Senator Gonzalez. Thank you for standing up for the over 100,000 teachers and public employees across the state of California, represented by unions that have passed resolutions calling for their pensions to divest from fossil fuels. My name is Miriam Ide, and I'm the Coordinating Director of Fossil Free California, a volunteer-led organization working to phase out fossil fuels across the state by cutting off financial support from the industry, which has powered decades of climate chaos, environmental racism, and lobbying efforts to kill climate action. The California pension funds, CalPERS and CalSTRS, are the two largest pension funds in the country, with over $9 billion invested in the fossil fuel production. These pension funds are attempting to leverage their massive influence by engaging with the fossil industry, but by doing so, they are giving tacit support to these companies and enabling them to continue what they do best: extract toxic energy, destroy our communities, and delay a transition to clean energy for all. For over 8 years, teachers, state workers, and students have called for their pensions to divest from fossil fuels. Many of CalPERS and CalSTR's own beneficiaries experience severe health impacts every day because they live near fossil fuel extraction operations or have endured drought and survived wildfires driven by climate change. Since 2014, evidence for fossil fuel divestment has continued to mount more and more as investors move their money out of the risky fossil fuel industry. In 2015, California passed SB 185, which mandated the pensions to divest from thermal coal because dying industries do not qualify as financially responsible investments. Then, in 2019, Corporate Knights released an independent study revealing that if the pensions had divested from fossil fuels in 2010, CalSTRS would have netted an additional $5.5 billion by 2019, an opportunity cost that jumps to $11.9 billion for CalPERS. In 2020, New York State Pension began their divestment from risky fossil fuel assets. Just this month, New York State Controller Tom DiNapoli announced another wave of divestments by saying, "To protect the state pension fund, we are restricting investments in companies that we believe are unprepared to adapt to a low-carbon future." As of today, funds worth nearly $40 trillion have divested themselves from fossil fuels, citing the financial risks, political impact, and climate impact that fossil fuel companies have. We are grateful to be working with Senator Gonzalez and Senator Wiener in making it clear that the fossil fuel industry cannot be allowed to determine our future. By divesting from fossil fuels, the boards of these pension funds would use their power to revoke the social license of the fossil fuel industry to poison our communities, destroy our climate, and avoid accountability. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Raven Fonseca Jensen, coordinator of the Divest CalSTRS campaign at Youth vs. Apocalypse.
Hi, my name is Raven. I'm a coordinator for the CalSTRS Divest CalSTRS campaign within Youth vs. Apocalypse, which is an organization fighting for climate and racial and social justice. As a young person, I'm really excited about the prospect of this bill. My generation, we live every day not knowing if we're going to have a livable climate when we are adults. This is really stressful for us, but it also doesn't compare to the current realities for many people, both within the state and around the world. As it's been said, many communities in California, predominantly Black and brown people, are being exposed to pollution from oil refineries that is killing them, making them sick. Furthermore, climate-related droughts and famines, other natural disasters are already causing incredible harm, disproportionately affecting people of color, poor people in global South countries. I'm worried about my future, but for many, the crisis is already here. The fossil fuel industry has had 50 years to make the changes needed to prevent climate catastrophe. Instead, they've lied and intentionally spread misinformation about the climate crisis in order to increase profit. Today, I'm excited at the prospect of fully divesting my teachers' pension money from fossil fuel companies and helping move us towards a more just future. Divesting these pensions from climate destruction, students, teachers, and workers in California can all stand united against big oil. Thank you very much, Senator Gonzalez and Senator Wiener, for supporting these efforts. For the next portion, I'd like to introduce Luna, Associate Professor at CSU Sacramento. And sorry, to clarify, I'm 18 years old. I live in Berkeley and Oakland, California.
Thank you, Raven. Osio, Luna Dagwadoa, Chichalegi, Chi Aniwodi, Wada Ekwa. Hello, my name is Luna. I am Cherokee, Choctaw, and I am Paint Clan. I'm grateful to be here. I'm an associate professor at Sacramento State, and I'm honored to serve as the vice president at the Capital Chapter of the California Faculty Association and as a co-chair of the CFA Women's Caucus. I'd like to start off by thanking Senators Lena Gonzalez, and Scott Wiener for authoring this incredibly important measure. A new study published in the journal Nature Climate Change reveals the extreme drought plaguing the Western US is worst in 1,200 years. They attribute 42% of the severity of the current mega drought to greenhouse gases from human activity trapping more heat in the Earth's atmosphere and oceans. In addition, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration just released a report demonstrating that coastal sea levels in the US will rise by 10 to 12 inches by 2050. Coastal areas will suffer from even more frequent and dramatic flooding, and water supply and trade routes could be disrupted. The projected increase will happen even if we're able to drastically reduce emissions. We are facing an existential crisis, one in which devastating wildfires and flooding are becoming the norm. Climate change is an issue of environmental justice, disproportionately impacting Indigenous communities, communities of color, and low-income communities due to historical oppression, power inequity, and lack of access to resources for prevention and relief. Indigenous nations have lived in balance with the earth since time immemorial, and the decisions we have made just in the past 150 years have brought our world to the brink of destruction. We must think of future generations when we make decisions that will impact their quality of life. The time to make meaningful investments into climate action is now. As faculty, we serve the students and communities in California who will be the most negatively impacted by climate catastrophe. As such, our union overwhelmingly approved a resolution asking CalPERS to divest from fossil fuels at our statewide assembly last year. CalPERS has an investing power of $469 billion, and a recent report estimates that out of these funds, CalPERS invests $5.5 billion in fossil fuel companies. Shareholder engagement does not have the accountability or enforcement to ensure real emissions reductions. This is why I would like to commend the senators for taking the right approach by calling for divestment. This measure will leverage the nation's largest public pension fund to stop investing in fossil fuel companies and continue the bold and progressive actions that California must take to address climate change. Once again, thank you for your commitment and passion. CFA stands in solidarity with you. It's my pleasure to introduce Carlos Davidson, Professor Emeritus from San Francisco State University, who's also a California Faculty Association member.
Thank you, Luna. I'm also now a grateful CalPERS pension recipient. So I can speak as a recipient of these pensions. We have to stop pretending that fossil fuel companies are good corporate citizens. Their own scientists knew their product was causing climate change, but the companies kept it secret. As they publicly denied the reality of climate change, they were extending the length of their ocean drilling rigs to deal with rising sea levels. They've spent over $1 billion financing the climate denial movement, which has set back action on climate change a decade or more. And every day they use their immense lobbying power in Washington, D.C. and Sacramento to fight climate legislation every step of the way. All this is why we want CalPERS and CalSTRS to divest from fossil fuel companies. The divestment movements from South African apartheid and tobacco show that divestment can be an effective way to bring about change. The majority of my union's 23 local chapters have called for a divestment, including locals in San Diego, Los Angeles, Bakersfield, Fresno, San Francisco, Stanislaus and Humboldt campuses, and more. A divestment resolution in our statewide meeting passed almost unanimously. Part of my union's mission is to look out for the well-being of retirees. We are confident that divestment is a financially prudent move. A number of studies back this up. For example, as New York City was considering divesting its pension funds, it hired the financial consulting firms BlackRock and Makita to independently write reports on divestment. Here is a quote from an article about the reports. Quote, BlackRock and Makita have separately concluded that investment funds have experienced no negative financial impacts from divesting from fossil fuels. In fact, they found evidence of modest improvement in fund returns, end quote. We are proud to be working with Senators Gonzalez and Wiener and a coalition of climate justice youth and environmental and health groups on this important issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carlos, and thank you to all of our wonderful speakers. I will now be opening up the press conference for any questions, any additional questions from the press. I know we've had a few already in the chat box and we've addressed some of those. Any other questions that may come up, please go ahead and drop those in the chat box and we will get to those questions. Again, those questions can be for the senator or any one of our speakers today. I will give that a few seconds for anyone that wishes to do any questions. Again, questions from the press. And in the meantime, we can, let's see, actually, we have one question here. So we have Aaron from Capitol in Maine. So the first question, and this I will direct to Senator Gonzalez, will you consider amendment to prohibit state legislators from holding fossil fuel investments? Several do, including those on key Senate environmental committees. That's our first question. It's a two-part question, so I'm going to go ahead and start with that one.
Yes, thank you so much, Erin, for participating and for the question. I think right now, I'm certainly open to discussing the amendments. This is where we're starting off with is CalPERS and CalSTRS, given the fact that this is the most immediate, I believe, in the need to just pivot from fossil fuel investments. And so we're going to start there, but I certainly welcome additional thoughts and amendments on how we can influence even individual legislators to pivot their own investments from fossil fuels. So I'd love to continue the discussion, but if anyone else has any additional thoughts on that, we'd love to hear it from our group.
And I think the second part of the question is along the same lines, Senator. Will you consider amendments addressing insurance companies that underwrite fossil fuel infrastructure in state?
Yeah, another great question. I know this brings this pivot, which is mega, over $9 billion is what we would be divesting from the state of California, and it's huge. Certainly, we know that we can't stop here and that we know that there's a lot more that we can do. So again, I welcome those amendments and those discussions and look forward to talking to the group about what more we can do to push the envelope here. Thank you.
Okay, Senator, we have another question from Jordan from Politico. Senator, can you comment on the political appetite for the bill? What is the sense as to whether this will get the necessary support in the legislature?
Thank you, Jordan. That is the $1 million question, isn't it? And that is why we're here and we're putting a full-pronged approach on this. And I have incredible partners here with Fossil Free California, with CFA, and of course with Youth versus Apocalypse, because it's all led by those who have pensions right now and by our youth who certainly don't want to see us continuing to invest in an industry that will just continue to degrade our environment day in and day out. So I think the political appetite is there. In fact, I am part of a Senate climate working group right now, where I am pushing this bill within that working group. And so I believe that appetite is there. And we've seen this, not just this movement outside of the state of California with New York and with Maine. We've also seen this with the CSUs, who now want to pivot from $5 billion from their investments. UC system as well. I believe they invested about $1 billion in clean energy. And some of the major investment portfolios, worldwide that you've seen. So this is nothing new, but it's also something that we will continue to have to push within this coalition to ensure that we mean business here in the state of California.
Thank you, Senator. We have another question from Nick Cajo from Courthouse News. Which committee do you anticipate the bill to be referred to?
Well, I think the first committee may be environmental quality. I could be wrong, but I always get the different committees. You never know, but I don't know if my team has any other suggestions on what other committees this could go to, but I am on environmental quality, so that's great, a good start. But I'm sure that there may be another referral, so we'll have to wait and see what next after this bill is formally introduced.
Thank you, Senator. Another question from Dan Backer. How will proponents of this bill overcome the power of the oil industry lobby in Sacramento? This will be fought by WSPA, Chevron, and other oil companies.
And I'll defer to our coalition here. If any of you have any questions, or any thoughts on that, we'd love to hear about how we can move forward. Yes, Carlos.
Well, I think all the panelists might have something to say on this, but the two of us in CFA, one thing is that we hope the legislature will listen to the pension recipients. Many of us in many different unions, so CFA in CalPERS, but California Federation of Teachers has also passed a divestment resolution. 14 chapters of the California Teachers Association have also passed divestment resolutions. Our counterparts, faculty in the community colleges, have passed a divestment resolution. So many pension recipients are saying, these are our pensions, we would like to see divestment. That's at least one piece of it. Other thoughts?
Yeah, I would add that precedent really has been set by Governor Newsom as well around Executive Order 1919 when he called for CalSTRS and CalPERS to leverage their $700 billion portfolios to advance climate leadership. And there is precedent in the legislature of California for divestment bills passing. One recently was the Coal Divestment Act, which required for all thermal coal companies to be divested. And I think that there is really solid evidence from New York, and then Maine recently did successfully pass a divestment bill, that this is a successful tactic.
Great, thank you, everyone. I think, Miriam, you answered another question we had from Zach Bright from Bloomberg Law. He was asking, you mentioned New York divesting from its pension fund. What other states have already divested or have upcoming similar plans to divest that you know of? So I think you answered some of that. I don't know if you have additional comments, and then we can move on to the next question. Okay, great. Let's see, we have another question from Mary Callahan from the Press Democrat. Can you please offer greater specificity about the parameters of the divestment order in the legislation? We'll give that a second.
Apologies here. I was trying to comment and multitask here. I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I apologize.
Yes, Senator. Can you please offer greater specificity about the parameters of the divestment order in the legislation?
Yes, absolutely. So we'll run over this again. So basically, SB 1173 will prohibit the California Public Employees Retirement System, as well as CalSTRS, the California State Teachers Retirement System, from investing in fossil fuel companies. There is a list of 200 of them that is sort of hard to obtain, but we've obtained that list. That is what Maine and New York utilized for that list of 200 companies as well. And we'd be happy to share that also. And we'll require divestment on any of those current investments by 2027. So it does allow us to phase in or phase out, I should say, for 5 years, which is similar to both Maine and New York as well. And we can share that list. I don't know if there's any additional questions on what else this includes, but it's pretty straightforward. And again, we know that New York has seen about $5 billion in disinvestment. Maine has seen quite a few $1 billion in disinvestment, but our own CSUs and UCs as well. And you can tell from our CFA partners that we've also had resolutions and deep support for this. So we're ready. This is long overdue, as I keep saying.
Great. Thank you, Senator. At the moment, I don't see any other questions from the press. I'll give it a few seconds before we go on to final remarks. So if you have any other questions, again, questions from the press, please feel free to drop them in the chat box now. We're getting ready to close the event with a few final remarks from our
Yes,
speakers.
I think someone had a question on the Carbon Underground, and yes, it would be the Carbon Underground 200. Thank you. I first want to thank again our partners, CFA, Fossil Free California, and Raven, the 18-year-old fierce one from Berkeley, from Youth versus Apocalypse. Again, not just as a senator, but as a mom who raises 3 boys here in California, and one of the most toxic areas in California, oftentimes been called toxic asthma alley, and we have toxic tours here. I don't like saying that. But again, and Ms. Luna, who has her dear daughter here, we're really doing this for the future generations. And we know that disinvestment, again, although there is major precedent globally, we know that disinvestment in California is much needed. And I, as a legislator, cannot legislate outwardly for regulations to other industries if we're not even doing it ourselves. So we've really got to buckle down and ensure that we're putting our money where our mouth is, not only in our state budgets and our policies, but really with our pension funds as well. And if I'll turn it over to the rest of the coalition if they'd like to have some lasting remarks. We'd love to hear from you.
Yes, I believe there's one more question that I believe Carlos wants to take on. Thoughts on CalSTRS saying it doesn't want to divest last week?
Yeah, both CalPERS and CalSTRS, their main argument for not divesting is that they're doing shareholder engagement. By owning stocks in these companies, they go to shareholder meetings and have private meetings with CEOs and lobby them to improve their environmental and social records. But if you look on climate change, even business studies like the big accounting firm KDMP did a study of 250 of the world's largest companies and looking at, okay, what are they doing on climate change? And not very good results. Like only 17% of those 250 companies had any concrete plans for reducing their emissions. Yeah, lots of them had net zero pledges and they get that out of engagement of, okay, we promise we'll do something, but no enforcement and no concrete plans to follow through. And there's a number of other investor groups kind of with the same sort of reports of like, we're doing this, but we're not seeing good results. So.
Thank you, Carlos. And now I will go ahead and open it up for any other speakers that are joining us today that would want to make any final remarks.
Sure. Yeah, I want to thank Senator Lina Gonzalez again for sponsoring this bill, as well as Scott Wiener, and really look forward to working closely with them as we build support within the legislature for divestment, and really believe that this is a powerful next step for creating a movement towards more and more climate legislation and to reduce the blockages for climate legislation that we have seen in the Senate and in the Assembly here in California. So thank you, and look forward to continuing to work with you.
Great. Senator Gonzalez, you can give your final remarks and that'll be
if Raven or Professor Luna would like to add anything. I know you've got a little one, but we do this for the little ones as well. Raven, would you like to say anything? Lasting remark from you?
Yeah, I guess I'll just echo what Miriam said. Thank you again so much for working on this. We've been working on this issue for a long time now, basically the entire time I've been in Youth versus Apocalypse. So it's just really exciting, and I'm feeling good.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Leo. Thank you to the team. We're looking forward to pushing this forward, and we're very excited to launch this incredible divestment bill. Thank you. Bye, everyone.